Well, hi, Melissa. So this is Melissa Griffin, and as the owner and counselor at Wellness Counseling, we've got 10 more minutes. What's one thing you would love for the world to know?
I mean, there's so many great things for us to know in the world. It feels like a really big question. But given I have 10 more minutes, I think one thing that I find really important, I'm going to stick in the realm of parents and families because that's what we do at Wellnest. We work with families, whatever your nest looks like, we've got you covered, right? So I'm going to kind of stay there. And I think one thing I'd really like parents to know is that when your child is, kind of 0 to 12, your child really needs you to co-regulate with them, meaning if
Mhm.
they have big emotions, they need you to be calm so they can get their emotions calm. So that's called co-regulation. They really need you to do that about 90% of the time. And then once we get into like adolescence, they still need you to do that like 50% of the time. And then I tell parents, like, think about yourself as an adult. You can't co-regulate yourself all the time. If you really thought about it, about 20% of the time, you probably need someone to help co-regulate, whether you're venting to your friend or talking to your spouse or crying on someone's shoulder, right? Those are all ways that we co-regulate with people, and people help us kind of regulate that nervous system within us. And so I like to tell that to parents because it helps kind of bring it back down to like, oh, yeah, my kids shouldn't be able to do this by themselves all the time. They really do need my help to do that.
That is so great. And I think it's so intense in a way that 90%. And I love how you've split it up for the lifespan, like 90, 50. I have an adolescent, so yes, absolutely. And then that 20. I can feel it in my own life. So tell me, Melissa, how did you discover this?
Um, you know, I'm like an avid reader, researcher. We like to stay up to date with the current trends and what's the newest research is. And I don't I think I read it somewhere. I'm not gonna be able to quote it right now where I came up with that. But I definitely read it somewhere. But then I've also just experienced it. Being a mom myself, and having, kids that are 7 and under, I know that they need me and that they're really not capable of regulating themselves. So it doesn't work to say, you need to calm down, go sit over there, right? They need
Mm,
me to hug them or cuddle them or something like that. So I've experienced it, and then just in my practice, listening to parents of teenagers or adults, right? And just coming up with ways that you can regulate yourself, and a lot of times people's coping skill for regulating themselves is talk to a friend, right? So like it's already there. We just have to put a name to it.
I love it. I love it. It's like it's helping manage expectations for
Hmm.
families. And it is so intense when they are under 12 because that 90%, yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot. And so, um, tell me if someone wants to do this and explore this idea, what's the first step they would take?
I mean, I think the very first step is gonna be within the parent, right? The parent has to regulate themselves in order to regulate your child. And we say that as parent coaches or therapists who work with parents, and we're like, yeah, just regulate yourself, right? Like, no big deal. No, it's a big deal. It is hard to regulate your spouse self, especially if you're a parent who is neurodivergent and you have ADHD, or you're on the autism spectrum, or a sensory processing disorder, or even like dyslexia or something like that. That loud noise that your child is making it's really hard to kind of sift through that and just
Yeah.
regulate. So that would be the first step, is learning how to regulate yourself in those moments of
Hmm.
like intense emotion or just sensory overload.
Totally. It sounds like a very personal thing. Like the parents get to know their unique way to be regulated.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree. It's like there's like inside of us, there's like like there's two parts of us so that we can regulate ourselves. And I think that's why children under 12 need us 90 because they don't have that really dialogue inside. And so,
Mhm.
yeah, and just pointing teachers or parents or anyone towards that inner dialogue. 'Cause I'm thinking, when we're in the classroom, because I just started teaching, I was telling you, it's like we have parents and adults, we have the inner dialogue. So that's the two pieces that need to work together.
Yeah.
And then you bring in the child.
Yes, yes. And I love
Right.
that you put that inner dialogue too, because if you think about it, you are your child's inner dialogue, right? They don't have that yet. So that's what you're doing. You're being their inner dialogue. And the more you repeat that, the one day your voice becomes your child's inner voice. So it really is important what we say to them.
Yeah, it's like their world is outside. Yeah, their whole world. They're still part of the world. And I think
Mm,
that's why play therapy is good. And we give children toys or a sand tray because they do so much project into the world and don't have that inner experience as much as that. Yeah, that 90% needed
yes.
external input. Awesome, beautiful. So, what is the common obstacle that people face when starting this?
I think the biggest obstacle is just not be having that self-awareness for that your internal dialogue and being able to recognize like, ooh, this emotion in my body is anger or overwhelm or and being able to
Mhm.
take a step and just try and name it first before trying to cope with it. I think a lot of people struggle with that because unfortunately, I think our society really teaches people like, just put it away. We don't need to talk about those emotions. Put it away and do your job. Just sit
Mhm.
quietly or whatever it is. Don't be a bother. Um, and so I
Mhm.
think that can be one of a really big common obstacle for a lot of adults even.
That's so cool that you say that because yeah, it is. It's okay to be a bother. It's like, yeah, sometimes you have to even bother yourself. Like, yep, yep, take a breath and everything like that. And I think one of the things, because I've also worked a lot in helping train parents, and one of the things that I like to add to this, if it's okay, sometimes we get flooded. Well, very often we get flooded as adults. And
Mhm.
so do our children. And I just love that term because it's like we can have the sweet dialogue and we ace it. We have that internal dialogue and we work with our kid, and then other times we lose it
Yeah.
and we become flooded. And so
Yeah.
I like to work with parents like how normal that is and how it's just part of our experience. So don't beat yourself up for that. It's part of getting into that whole realm of taking care of yourself. Yeah.
And I would add to that too that like
Yeah.
repair is super important because we are gonna
Mm,
mess up. And I tell parents all the time, like, you are modeling constantly for your child, but the most forgiving part of this is that you get to mess up and then you get to model how to fix it. So, and that's beautiful, right? Because that means, oh, I don't have to be the perfect parent because my child also actually needs to see someone make a mistake and then how we fix it. So,
yeah.
it's a whole circular thing that we gotta go through.
Yes, it's gotta be real. It's very
Yes.
real. Yeah, what you're saying. And it's so neat because I love what you're saying, and I wanna add another thing, which is what we call, rupture and repair cycle as
Mhm,
therapists, and, just anyone who has a relationship with their child or other people can understand that feeling of rupture and repair. But
mhm,
you also have it inside
mhm.
with that
Yep,
internal dialogue. You can lose yourself, and that's what I call flooding. That's what it feels like, "Oh, I lost touch with myself
yes.
for a minute."
I'm gonna
And then
steal
how
that
do you
term.
repair? Mhm. Say that
Well,
part again?
I said I'm gonna steal that term, I love that, flooding, because that's exactly what it is, you're just flooded.
Mhm.
And then yeah,
You
and then
do.
and then you're right, like, not even repairing with just your child, but, like, also repairing with yourself and giving yourself grace and being like, "You know what? Self, I forgive myself. That I'm working on it, I'm trying, and I'm human, and I just got flooded that one time, and it's gonna be okay."
Yeah, that's really sweet. Yes, please use it. Yeah, I think flooding it's a good term. Um, yeah, and it's gotta have its purpose. I think it's when we get overwhelmed or like right to the edge of it. Like,
Mhm.
yeah. So we gotta come back to it. So very sweet. So one more question. Two more questions. How does someone know they're doing it right?
Oh, that's
Mm,
really hard. I think it's gonna be, like, different for every person. and how they know they're doing it right, because it's going to look different for every person of how you co-regulate with your child. I know personally, I feel super successful when my child is screaming at me, or two, I have three under 7, right? So like 3 of them could be screaming at me, and I can take a deep breath and then just like calmly be like, okay, guys, we're going to take a pause. And then once we get everyone calmer and we get through the tantrum or whatever's going on, the storm has passed. Afterwards, if I have felt like I stayed super regulated and super calm and I did not become elevated because my kids are elevated, there's like this feeling of like great prideness, like I'm just very proud afterwards. So I feel like
Yeah.
that reflection piece might be how you know you can do it right. But
Awesome.
again, that's like those are personal kind of goals and values and wins that you have to establish for yourself.
Nice. And I think it's important too. I had never to do that. I've never really thought of that before. Like, okay, so how will it look when you're doing it right? And just sit down and say, I will, and I'll stay connected to myself, just like how you're saying of your personal values. And as you're describing what feels good to you, feeling that pride and navigating everybody through, it's like really good leadership is what I thought of when you.
Oh, yeah.
So that's sweet. Wow, this is so helpful. And I think not only the 90% part for our young children, but the 20% part for ourselves and how much we still need, of course, a friend, and we need to rush to talk to someone, and just a colleague, a confidant, a mom, whatever we can, and the
Yeah.
team with their
And
50%.
yes.
Yeah. So well, that's exactly our 10 minutes. So thank you so much for joining me. And it's an awesome conversation. And yeah, maybe we'll get to chat again.
Yeah. Thank you
Thanks.
so much.
Yeah.
Bye.
Yeah. Bye.